I am preparing. One second. Oh, wait. Okay. Okay. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome, everyone. 2 minutes late because of me. So we're ready. We're good to go. It's good to see everyone here today. We've got a pretty good crowd here in Horeb. And we also have a group that are watching on United Israel YouTube. So it's good to be here with you today. We covered a lot of ground, and I'm interested in hearing some of your thoughts. I'm looking for, we had a lot of good conversation going on in the chat during the teaching where different people were bringing up various aspects. And so I'm real curious as to some of your thoughts here. This is your chance to bring in questions and comments, and you know how this works. If you're with me in Discord, if you're with me in Horeb, you simply raise your hand. We will bring you onto the stage and look forward to hearing some of those things that you brought up. I know that Jodelle had some points that she brought up, Dave Tyler, and many others. So again, I I had quite a bit of time to lay out some of this interesting connection between Egyptian records and the biblical text, and so now it's going to be your turn to do that. Let me add one thing. There are intense debates over who the Pharaoh was. And what you'll find is that every person who weighs into this, guess what? They claim to have cracked the code. They know who the Pharaoh was. They know when the Exodus took place. They can prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt. And so I think all of us are familiar with that. I just grabbed a few of my books that are in one section of my library only because I wanted to grab just a handful. I've got some David Roll here. I have this handy book, by the way, is called The Exodus, Historicity, Chronology, and Theological Implications, 5 views on the Exodus. And all 5 of these will probably convince you that they're right. Richard Elliott Friedman on the Exodus, Roll, Pharaohs and Kings, Hoffmeyer, Ancient Israel and the Sinai. So, like many of you, I've read a lot of these different accounts, and man, I'm going to tell you what, there are some really good arguments out there. John Langberg was here with us this morning, he and Lyndon. It's her birthday, by the way. Happy birthday, Lyndon. But he was presenting his view, and he's got some good points on what he's read, and this is the way it is. So anyway, make sure that when we get into this discussion, remember that these are very much debated views, and so I try not to be so opinionated that I block out other views, and that's why I'm curious to hear some of your views. Many of you have studied this as much, if not more, than I have. So what are some of the views that some of you have? Anybody want to jump in here? Raise your hand and share some of your views. I've got a page full of notes, but I'd prefer to allow someone else on the stage. And I'm looking, and all of the great conversation that we had, and I don't see anybody ready to jump on the stage yet. I can. Let's
Ross,
see.
this is Dave.
Hey,
Ross,
Dave.
this is Dave. That's the wrong. We're in the wrong place. You can't raise hands here. You can't bring someone onto the stage in this
Oh,
version. We're in
that's
the.
okay.
We're
That's
we're
okay.
in a community.
Hold on, Dave. When you say
Yeah.
we're in the wrong place, we're in a different place. And we're in a different place. I said, raise
Oh,
your hand, but we're in the place that Seth put us today because it allows more of a community discussion, sort of
okay.
like what we did on Zoom. This is purposeful. And
Okay.
so, anyway, so you have the microphone. You don't even have to be called up on stage. Let
Oh,
me
okay. Well,
before you go. Let me say
yeah.
that. I mean, before you speak, so what we're going to do then is we're going to, if everyone who is not speaking will mute their mic, and then whenever we get ready, you want to share some of your side of what what your views are, you just unmute and we'll try to have a conversation. So go, David.
All right. Well, just quickly, I was really impacted in the 90s when David Roll came out with the book Pharaohs and Kings. And he does a great job at putting, finding the real timeline. I mean, again, it's a theory, so don't get me wrong. I don't know. I wasn't there when the Exodus happened, or at least I don't know that I was there.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm joking for people that don't know me. Um, but my point is this: when you look at his timeline, it does reconcile a lot of the problems in the history and archaeological record. And it also kind of agrees with the Bible in the Book of Kings, saying that Solomon's temple was built so many years after. Um, and so at the end of the day, I think you should look at roll stuff. In the dialogue, I just put up a bunch of stuff on the new chronology, and it's got the links to his books, but also some of the really good stuff that I've kind of gleaned out of that. And would be interesting if we mixed roles ideas and timeline with Deborah Hearn's, Exodus route. I don't believe Roll's Exodus route, and I
Right.
certainly don't believe. I don't believe that Mount Horeb is in Saudi Arabia. It's ridiculous to think that when you read the Bible. They would have had to been transported by a transporter to get there in time, because really, I was just doing an analysis on refugees, speed of refugees, and this is a modern thing, and they're saying 6 to 10 miles a day for refugee groups, large
Yeah.
refugee groups. So start doing that, and the math just doesn't work out. So, anyways, I like Roll's timeline. He claims he finds Joseph. It all makes a lot of sense. Again, I'm sure there's holes in his theory, and certainly when he starts saying that, that the Exodus route was the southern route to St. Catharines, I don't agree with that.
Right.
Anyways, I put that up there for people to look at and discuss, and I'm open to other points. But David Roll and I talked about Saudi Arabia, and I gave him that book. I sent him a book that was about that in the 90s, where this guy, went over there and saw the melted rocks in Jabal al Musa. And, we talked quite a bit about that. The one you got to be careful because David Roll is very, he can be very angry when he talks. So don't let that drive you away. Oh, yeah. Condescending is the term. It's a problem for any talented scholar not to get condescending, because they've heard it so many times and they're just so sick of it, like,
Yeah.
look, here's what I showed you that, and that's what I like about your class and people like Dr. Tabor. He talks on there like he's your friend. I when I'm doing my Stairmaster in the morning, I put up his new videos, and it's just like he's sitting there talking to you.
Yeah.
And I don't mind that they're 48 minutes because I can get a good workout in. Anyways, Russ, again, I thought it was a great discussion. You brought up a lot of good things. It's good to revisit these things because, especially after the Moses scroll discussions, these things have new, I have to consider them in different ways. That's
Yeah.
all I'm saying, and I love that. And we got some really good people, got good ideas. Let me get off the talking. I just want to say you did a great job. New chronology PDF under dialogue, and I put up a lot of things.
Hey, Dave, thanks a lot for your comments. And just, I've made this point. I had not read David Roll. You and I've discussed this quite a few times until you really pushed me repeatedly. Hey, read Roll, read Roll, read Roll. The book that I read, I didn't first read Pharaohs and Kings: A Biblical Quest, which is what you told me to read. I looked up Roll. Maybe I didn't write down what you advised me to read. Anyway, I ended up reading David Roll, the newer book called Exodus: Myth or History, and I really liked that book. I know James brought up last week. There is a Facebook post which I don't know about anymore because I don't have Facebook, as some of you now know. But anyway, I have saved his comment from years ago that he posted when he entered into this discussion on the Exodus and so forth, and I have it saved as a note. So maybe I meant to post this last week. We talked about
Put
it.
it up under, yeah, put it up
Yeah,
under the new chronology I just did.
that's right. Now, did you do that in Discord, David?
Yes. Yeah, under
Okay,
dialogue in Discord, I put new chronology PDF, and it's just some of my old savings of all these things. But if
excellent.
we should throw some stuff in there, and like I say, not everything he says is right, but also where the stone is that Joshua put down as a sign, it, it's really that's really good in this whole chronology, and
Very
also
good.
also Jericho. So they were just looking at the wrong time frame.
Well, I tell you, I appreciate all your work on this. So, and thanks for posting that in the Discord on Horeb. It really is driving a good conversation there. One more point, and I'm waiting on someone to jump in. So, just if you have something to say, please do.
I had
But
something, Russ.
all right, James, I'll get you in just a second. One quickly though, we've started also on Twitter a community chat too, so feel free to do that. Okay, James, welcome. Good to see you this morning. Shabbat shalom.
Yeah, you hadn't. I didn't turn my camera on. I could, I guess.
Well,
Let's
I can
see.
see that photo of you. That's nice. If
That's
it
pretty
looks,
good. That's probably about how I look. There you go.
yeah, there you
So
go.
I just uploaded that Excel spreadsheet that you made for me years ago.
Yep.
It's a PDF, and take it with like whole shakerfuls of salt. But what it's trying to do is, given people who argue for a 15th century Exodus, as you noted today, it takes everything from Usher on across. I don't have it in front of me right now.
Yeah.
Actually, I can pull it out. I want to add one caveat because there's one there that says Tabor, and it's really not mine, but I'll tell you why it says Tabor. So you've got, it's in the chat. I did it as a document, so I think you can see it. Do you want to confirm that it can be seen, Russ?
Where is it? It's in Discord
In the chat,
discussion.
yeah, I think it came out all right.
Okay, let me
Yeah,
see.
I see it. It's a PDF
Okay,
file.
good.
Okay. So you guys can look at that. It's kind of helpful because it also has a lot of things about the Hebrew calendar that people often make mistakes on, like how do you move from BC to CE, because there's no year zero. It's got all kinds of notes like that that are helpful. So what it first has is Usher, which is the traditional, clearly it was in the Schofield Bible and so forth. And then the Seder Olam is the Masoretic text. And in each case, you have two figures. You have sort of year of the world and then what our Gregorian date would be. And then you have the Seder Olam adjusted because it's generally admitted by everybody that I know of, even rabbis, that the Seder Olam is missing, I believe it's 250
Yeah, it's 250
years.
years, if I'm
It
not
has to do with the
mistaken.
Persian period. And I mean, it's just wrong. If you take a look, for example, look at the Exodus. Let's see. Exodus comes out. No, the Exodus isn't bad, but as you go on down, you find out like the first temple destroyed and so forth in the unadjusted. Wait a minute. Yeah, Exodus 13:13. So it's a lot of scholars would like that, but It's not Masoretic text. Then you've got Faustus, who's a guy many of us met years ago. He would be typical of a fairly reputable revised system. And then Ernest Martin had his own system. And the Tabor system isn't really mine. I put my name on it because I was trying to show what would happen if you took note of all of these together, what you might come out with. So you can see that it's a little different. And then Finch is a new guy I put on, Paul Finch. And his also is pretty interesting. And then there's other notes you can, and then at the bottom is Chuck Dobbs, one of our people,
Yep.
and his ideas about the Jubilees. And Dave Tyler also helped to compile that. So I thought that might be interesting to people just to play around with. I didn't have Joe Dell's on there. We can add it if
Yeah.
we want to. I think it'd be good to add since she's in our group. I don't know if she's here right now, but she comes out with, as I recall, Exodus in the 1500s, not the 1400s. And that's also what Semka Jacobovici has. So anyway, just explaining that chart. I guess the upshot would be, as you said, each time you read one of these systems, other than the Seder Olam that people admit has been adjusted to remove any calculations leading to Jesus in terms of the 70 weeks prophecy. I mean, that was basically what was behind it. But other than that, each one it's almost like reading those views of the Exodus. Each one you get kind of convinced by when you read it. Think,
Yeah.
oh yeah, and then you have to come down to very minor differences really between them.
Yeah.
And you can see that everybody's working with very much the same thing. If I had to just throw out a date myself, since the Tabor column is me putting together all these others, it's not my view. I would probably
Everyone
go with
get your pens ready. Get your pens ready. Here it is.
yeah, I'd go with 1446. I would actually
Yeah.
agree with Chuck on that. And he's basing on Roger Young and Bryant Woods and some others that are all coming out with that date. And it's pretty tight, I think. And Finch, I really respect. And if he were here, he would be able to shut my mouth with all of his knowledge. And notice he has, let's see, looking at 1493. But as you said in your class today, once you get into the 15th century BCE, 1400s, you're basically talking about Tutmos, the first, second, third, and on.
Yeah.
We definitely got a very clear window of the 18th dynasty, and that's where it kind of stands or falls. And remember, our Egyptian history is also, as Roll points out, not necessarily written in stone either. I have a little chart that shows all the dates for the pharaohs, but that's not exactly irrefutable because
Right.
people have revised ways of overlapping pharaohs and so forth. So anyway,
Mm-hmm.
that's my input. Rather have
Hey, I
everybody.
appreciate the comments.
So don't publish
Yeah.
that chart because I mean, I just want it for don't. I'm not giving anybody the right to circulate it, but just take a look at it if you're interested in doing these comparisons. And then the notes will
Yeah.
be helpful no matter what you come up with. Okay,
Right.
thanks.
Good deal. All right, I appreciate your comments. And look, we have other people. I know Joe Dell had some comments. Joe Dell, I'm not sure if you. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you might want. I know you've done a lot of extensive work in this area. So if you'd like to comment, you're welcome to. I encourage to. I don't mean to put anybody on the spot, but I mean, where you at, Joe Dell? On mic.
I'm here. I'm trying to get my video camera to work.
All right.
And so yeah, so yeah, I believe I am the queen of tech issues. I
Okay.
don't know that it's possible
You
to have
mean
that anymore.
you mean you're the queen of people who struggle with tech issues, or you're the queen of solving them?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely struggle with tech. Okay. Okay. There. Turn on
Well,
camera.
even
Let's see.
if you can't get the video because it's so tiny on the screen and less people. Now, if someone wants to enlarge the person, whoever's speaking, you can click on that particular person and make them larger within
Yeah, I don't
Discord.
know. I'll
But we can
yeah.
hear you fine. The audio's working wonderful. So
Okay, good. Yeah, because everything on my computer says it's on, but then there's nothing in the thing. So I'll just ramble on, I guess, a little bit here if y'all don't
yeah,
if
that's
y'all
good.
will indulge me. First of all, I think Dave posted that he had ordered my book and Amazon canceled it. Back and this is referring to the Suffering Servant book. I have been working on the Suffering Servant book over the last couple years, and I thought I was really, really close to publishing it. And that was when our business kind of went haywire, and I ended up working about 80 hours a week plus and homeschooling. It was just crazy, crazy for about 2 years. So it got delayed. I then had it at the typesetters. We were all ready to go. And I had it at the typesetters and I got the first proofs back and I began working on a workbook to go with it. And as I was working on the workbook, I'm like going, oh my goodness, I'm covering way too much information, kind of like I did in volume 1. So
Yeah.
I have now divided it into 3 books. And then the first book is going to be a prequel to the Suffering Servant because today you cannot discuss the Suffering Servant without discussing both Israel and Judah. I'm sorry, without discussing Jesus and Judah, as the greatest 2 possibilities for the Suffering Servant.
Right.
So the prequel to this book is going to be Does Jesus Exist? I hope to have that one posted on Amazon in about a month. I am not going to do what I did last time where I post it, weeks or months before it's ready to publish. So it'll go live probably maybe about 2 weeks before I have all the final galley proofs and we're all ready to go. So anyways,
Okay.
that's what's coming. And then the Suffering Servant will be Suffering Servant Part 1 and Suffering Servant Part 2. So that's that. So it is coming, and then it'll come in rapid succession because the 3 books will come just probably 6 weeks to 2 months after each other.
Okay.
But going back to the Exodus, yeah, I am in favor of the higher dates, but there is something that I'd like to share with you guys, if y'all don't mind me reading something to you. So this is from Donald Redford, who has compiled all of the known documents, historical records that have to do with the Hyksos, that have to do with any possibility of an exodus from an early period.
When
And
you say
he,
early, are you going to give us the date there too? I just want to. I'm taking notes. So
yeah, so for
okay.
me, this is around 1550.
Okay.
Um, and and the issue, scholars thankfully are not anal about this because in Egyptian chronology, this is called the second intermediate period. And the reason it's called the second intermediate period is because there was a breakdown of civilization. You had several different dynasties, which a dynasty is a dynasty only because of where its capital is. So if you have different capitals at the same time, they're considered different dynasties. And this one, so Redford considers this particular inscription that I'm going to read, and then I'll bring in some similarities with what we find in Exodus and kind of the different laws even that we find in the Torah that are very, very similar to this. Um, he dates this as part of the 13th dynasty, but he footnotes the fact that the 13th and the 17th dynasty, I'm sorry, 16th dynasty are really kind of a continuation of the same thing. So he doesn't really see any distinction between the 13th and 17th dynasties. So that's Redford's take on this. And a little background to this is an inscription that refers to the crime of one Menhotep. Um, and I don't know if any of you guys, you have kids, um, if you're fans of the Prince of Egypt, the old Disney cartoon. There's so many similarities to this that came in that cartoon. And it just so happens, as many of you guys know, that Richard Elliott Friedman was a major consultant on that movie.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's one of the reasons. It had some scholars actually involved in it.
Exactly. And it's funny because he actually uses some of the names from this inscription in his movies. So just, I mean, that's for me, it's just something to kind of chew on. That's ironic, but perhaps not so ironic. So this refers to, again, the sin of Menhotep and his unauthorized dealing with outsiders. So, um, who could the outsiders possibly be? So I'm just going to read this. It's about 5 paragraphs. If y'all will indulge me here real quick. It says Regnal year 3, month of Priot, and please be gracious with my massacring of Egyptian
That's all right.
because
We're all in the same boat on those Egyptian names, so don't worry about that.
okay.
We don't count off on spelling either, so go ahead.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'd massacre that one too. Okay, His Majesty the King of Upper and Lower Egypt. So the fact that it says Upper and Lower Egypt, we know that this is a time when the double crowns are united. There's not two separate dynasties. It says Nabkari, son of Ra, and Tef, given of life, Ra forever. Royal decree to the seal bearer of the king of Lower Egypt, the mayor of Captos, Menhep, Menhemtep, the king, and this is kind of going to be Menhotep's rival here,
Yeah.
Menhemtep, the king's son and commandment of Captos, KN, the seal bearer of the king of Lower Egypt, and stolest of men, the temple scribe, Neferhotep the elder, the entire host of Captos, and the temple staff in its entirety. C. This decree is brought to you to inform you the effect that my majesty, LPH, which refers to place of the correspondence of the Pharaoh. So this is a royal decree has had come the scribe of the god seal of Ammon, see Ammon, the eldest of the hall, Ammon Wuzer, the conduct and investigator of the temple of men, to the effect that now here's the crime, here's the charge. The temple staff of my father Men has petitioned my majesty, saying, a sorry affair has just transpired in the temple. A hostile attitude has been adopted by, and they take out his name. Instead, it says, damn be his name. So they will not mention his name. But but then later on it says Teti's son Menhotep. So this could be, first of all, this Teti, we know that this is likely a female name and not a man's name.
Yeah.
And we know from other records that Teti was a princess from Lower Egypt. Um, so that had married the Pharaoh of Upper Egypt. So this right here, the criminal appears to be Menhotep, have cast him forth from the temple of my father Men, have him expelled from the temple office, his sons, heirs, and excommunicated him. His food rations and contract of meat salary are to be taken away, so that his name is not mentioned in the temple. Now, remember, in throughout the Torah, what do we see? Like the name of Ammon or Amalek shall be blotted out; it shall never be mentioned again. So there are some similarities here.
Yeah.
Um, and it is normally done of this sort to show rebellion and hostility against his God. Now, what is this hostility against his God? I mean, that could be simply something that's just political, or this could actually be a distinction that Menhotep is making between, not actually venerating the actual deity. Destroy his documents in the temple of men and the treasury, and on any scroll of the temple likewise. As for any king or any potential who shall forgive him, he shall not receive the white crown, he shall not elevate the red crown, he shall not sit upon the throne of Horus in the land of the living. The two ladies shall not be gracious to him as the one whom they love. So when Moses comes before Pharaoh, so whether this is a story of the historical Moses or not, it does provide a historical background that Pharaoh, even if we're in a new dynasty, even if it's a new culture, a new era, what part did this older social norm carry over to where if Pharaoh forgives Moses, if Pharaoh does not prosecute Moses for his crimes because of killing the this in this instance specifically killing the Egyptian slave, um, what liability did Pharaoh bear before his people? Could he lose his crown for not prosecuting Moses? And that,
Yeah.
is something that you see in some of the movies. So, as for any commandment or any mayor who shall intercede on his behalf with the Lord of the land to forgive him, so let his people, his property, and his fields be confiscated to the endowment of my father men. So notice this specifically talks about the confiscating of the lands of his people. So this is not just um, the person themselves, but it appears it could also extend to whatever ethnicity he has that could be confiscated as well.
Yeah.
The Lord of Captos, and no one of his courtier, his family, paternal or maternal, is to be brought into his office. And his office is to be given to the seal bearer of the Lower Egypt and administrator Hatat or Menemhat. Let his food rations and meat salary contract be given to him and confirmed as it belonging to him in writing. So, anyways, that is the inscription. And I just
Where
find
can
it.
people, I'm sorry, Jodelle, where can people get this? It's a lot of detail there, and people might want to look at it and really think about it and study it. So do you have a link to that? Is it in an article? Is it in
Um,
a book?
no, it's in a book, and for me, this book is one of the Bibles of. Let me see if I can find it on Amazon. It's one of the Bibles of researching the Exodus. The other one is Kim Ryholt, has several publications. Anything by Kim Ryholt, which is Ryholt, I
Okay.
think is a must to your library. Here it is.
Well,
The
you can
problem,
certainly
yeah.
post it, yeah, because what we're trying to do, and I think I know other people. We're gonna look for Seth posted. If people want to jump in, they can post a picture of a raised hand. So we'll figure this out. But I think this is a great way to do it. We've got all these different ideas, and like Jodelle is saying, there are certain books that you kind of you have to have on your shelf if you're really going to jump into this. Tyler brought up the stuff by Roll. I think this book, The Five Views of the Exodus, is really a book that you ought to have on your shelf because it's one of those things that as we look at this subject material, it's such a central part of the biblical story. I mean, if you have to really dig in to get any information because it's so buried in the sands of time, if you will. Um, but anyway, yeah. So Jodelle, if I see you posted that link, that's the book that contains that inscription you were just reading about.
It is the problem with this and so much of really, really excellent scholarship is that they are rare and out of print.
Yeah.
You may be able to get them in ILLs, but as we know, libraries today are purging anything biblical. So it's really, and then there's other institutions that don't want to learn or don't want to loan them. So it's an excellent book. I mean, lots of information, lots of archaeology. Oren has a fantastic piece in there. Just solid evidence. But again, it's just really hard to find these books.
Okay. All right. Well, look, post this as well if you can, Jodell. I know that you're on the Discord. Well, you're here now. So if you can maybe under what Dave kicked off in the community, in the chat, in the dialogue, maybe you can post that link there as well, just so it doesn't get lost in this flowing community screen here. But
Okay,
that way
and that
people, yeah, go ahead.
that comes back to technology. So, yeah, if it just, I might later on just have somebody tell me where that is, and I'll do it.
Okay. All right. Yep. Yep. And just so you know, just since it just came up, and please, someone else jump in and share some of your thoughts. But immediately to the left side of the screen that you're looking at now, all of you who are on the Horeb server, you'll see you'll see dialogue. It's under general, you'll see home and dialogue, or you should see dialogue. If you click dialogue, that opens that up, and then you can submit everything that you can dream of, articles related to our discussion today. Very helpful to put them in this place. So now, thank you very much, Jodell. I know you're like me in this sense, you and Tyler and maybe James and who knows who else. We could talk on this forever. We do want to get other people to jump in, though, so feel free to jump in and let everybody know what some of your thoughts are, some of your insights on the Torah reading today. One thing that Jodell brought up in the discussion today during the YouTube video of the class is that, I brought up that we don't know the Pharaoh's name. At least the Bible doesn't give us the Pharaoh's name. And we do get Pharaoh's names later. We get Necho, we get Shishak, we get various, just a few, 2 or 3 names at the most that are conveyed in later biblical writing. But Jodell posted a comment that says, according to Hoffmeyer, that it wasn't so common for people to use the names, to record the names of the pharaohs in documents and so forth. And there is some truth to that. We see in the biblical accounts that later, once you get into later Jewish writings, you will see these names appear, but not in ancient writings. So that's a good point. What does that mean? I don't know. I mean, it's certainly, we do see this. We see evidence of that. So, but what are some of the other thoughts? I think that it's important that, for me, one of the things that has occupied a lot of hours of my life is trying to nail down the timing of, excuse me, excuse me, the timing of the Exodus. Is it an early date, say 15th century, 16th century, or even earlier? I mean, some of the things that the Tylers and I in particular have done a lot of work around Anati's proposals. Anati is one who pushes or advances as a possible Horeb, Har Karkum, known now as Har Karkum. And that archaeology pushes us way, way early. So the question becomes, is that possible based on everything we know? And I think that that's the key there. We just have to try to work on that and nail it down. It's an open
What's my
field.
microphone doing?
I hear you. Who is that?
Oh, okay. This is East Alabama, Charles Sutton.
Hey, Charles. How
I
are you,
found it
sir?
very, oh, fine, fine. This beautiful day to meet with y'all.
Yeah.
Very interesting topic. You were talking about the timing, and I'm interested in timing as well. I found it very interesting that the loss of Ma'at, the loss of law and order, was necessary prior to the Exodus, and just kind of looking at parallelisms with what we could expect in the loss of order, the loss of law and order prior to the second Exodus, and just a thought to think on, and maybe a little comfort in some of the troubles that we see in our world today.
Interesting correlation. Yeah, the concept of Ma'at is fascinating, and of course I came across it in a commentary years ago, but it's certainly something to consider. And we have to wonder, are there corollaries not only between Egyptian thought and what ultimately made its way into Hebrew thought, but as you suggest, Charles, should we look around us and say if there's something from the ancient world about Ma'at and social order and things like that that we ought to look at, then quite possibly it's worth taking a look at that now too. So, Charles, are you still with me? I just jumped in. I wasn't shutting you down there.
Oh no, I'm still here. I'm not planning on leaving. Just I'm more interested in the second Exodus than I am the first at this point. Uh, so there's a lot of trouble in the world, and I don't know. I may end up being a little bit comforted about some of the troubles in today's world if I can understand that it's what's happening with the world governments is maybe symbolized by the loss of control over civilization that Pharaoh underwent,
Yeah,
and maybe his fear of losing his authority. Because I've heard of this concept before that rulers lose their rulership when even a natural disaster can cause the loss of a place of authority in older cultures.
right.
It kind of correlates, and I may get some comfort from that.
Good points. Hey, thanks for your comments, Charles. Bob, I see you. I think it's time for you. I wanted to add one point on Charles' comment about, he says, I'm more concerned with the second Exodus than the first, if I can paraphrase what he said. And you would be very much in line with what Jeremiah 16 says, because one day it's no longer going to be said, as the Lord lives who brought up the people of Israel out of the land of Egypt, but as the Lord lives who brought the people of Israel up out of the land of the north and the land, all the lands where he had driven them. So I see that as the object of our focus is toward that second Exodus. Bob, welcome. How are you, sir? If you unmute, we're ready to hear your comments.
There we go. Hey, good morning
Hey, good
or
morning.
afternoon. Um,
Right.
Curious if next week you were going to be talking about the Ipuwer papyrus at all. I mean, there's plenty of people that would have you believe it's 10 sentences long with, each sentence perfectly describing one of the plagues and supporting Exodus. And there's other people that would have you believe it has nothing to do with any of it. And the older I get, the more skeptical I get of anybody that just writes facts when they may be well-educated opinions, but
Yeah.
it's still an opinion.
Yeah, no, good point. These classes, as you heard this morning. I wished everyone a happy 2022, which I still hope that your 2022 was happy, even though it's. So some people are saying, "Wait a minute, is this live or is it Memorex?" So next week's class, I don't know yet if I talked about that papyrus, but I do know that I've talked about it in other classes. So I'll look at that. I hope I did. If not, then we'll talk about it in the discussion afterward. In fact, it's funny, after the class today, in the building here, the Langbergs and I were discussing that very topic. And what we see a lot of times is people want so badly to tie something like this inscription or papyrus. They want to tie it into and say, look, this proves or validates this story. And we see this in some of the great video productions of our time, like Mahoney films. They'll bring something up and you're blown away, but quite often we don't cover all the details. Even within the biblical text, I might add, if we look at the three major accounts, the three major listings of the plagues, we see differences. We see differences in what was the plague and how many there were, And I know people could say, well, some are poetic and so forth, but we have to consider all of this and don't just give a check mark and say, absolutely, this is what this ancient Egyptian scribe was talking about. So anyway,
I
no, good points.
say that
Yep, go ahead.
greatly appreciate. No, I just want to say I greatly appreciate the community and also listening to Dr. Tabor, the way you guys present things and allow people to come to their own conclusions. I'm like I said, I'm just so tired of opinions being presented as fact.
Yeah. Well, you're in good company, Bob. Uh, I think as I look at the names and pictures that are on the screen in front of me, I think we are surrounded by a group of people who really, really just want to know, and we're all big people, meaning we're all grown ups, and we're grown ups physically, and I think for most people, maturity wise, spiritually as well. So look, it's really this is the passion of my life. I love the biblical stories, and what I really want to do is spend the rest of my days discerning that which is true and which can be validated, and be honest when things don't quite line up with what we know from either archaeology or some other science. So I appreciate you, Bob. I appreciate that we're surrounded by people who are willing to take a close look, a critical look, an analytical look at these things. So thanks for joining us. I'm happy that you found us. All right. Let's see. I have Nikita. Nikita, how are you, my friend? Let's hear your thoughts, your comments.
Shalom and blessings to everyone in the community. Can you hear me fine?
We can hear you fine. Thanks for that.
Oh, wonderful. I'd like to add a hallelujah to your little statement that you just made. How about spending your life discerning, separating like the Most High did in all creation, the light from the darkness, so you know exactly which path that He wants us to walk on.
Right.
I mean, while you were saying it, I was like, yeah, hallelujah. You must make mention of that.
That's right.
Okay, so my comment would be if anyone and everyone would consider the hardening of Pharaoh's heart as a young person coming up and after devoting my life to the Most High, that used to bother me, but I wasn't looking deep enough. And I praise Him for showing me everyone, the way you are raised affects the way that you live. I mean, some things we do overcome, you know, especially the unpleasant things.
Yeah.
But Pharaoh was all his life, he was taught that he and he alone is the strength of Egypt. The only contradictory thought or the only evidence of this not being true is when the deity of Joseph showed that he controlled everything. And it says in Exodus chapter 1, verse 8, that they had forgotten that. So during this time when Moses had come back to, by God's direction, come back to, you know, get the people out, he's still thinking that I can control everything. I just got to find a different way to do it. So the hardening of Pharaoh's heart was himself an attempt to manipulate the Most High. It's like he could rule the Most High with deception. He's a ruler above all. So if he's like, well, if you take this away, I'll let the people go. And then the Most High takes the plague away. He's like, see, I made him do what I wanted him to do. I just had to lie in order to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
So when the Lord was proving not only to the Hebrew, but also to the Egyptians that one, he still exists, and two, he's in control of everything, Pharaoh was playing his little mental chess game as to how can I get this deity of Moses to obey me. And if I have to lie to get the obedience, then that's what I will do.
Yeah.
So it was all just up to the Passover when he realized the gut punch was, you're not controlling me.
Right.
I'll run everything. And it's basic to human nature. You see it in abusive relationships where the person lies to the other person in order to get the person to do whatever they want. The people of this wonderful book, this guidance of life that the Most High gave us, they are people. They're not characters in a story where, we can figure out and process and predict their behavior. No, Pharaoh was clever in what he thought he was doing. And if you think about the Pharaoh of Joseph's day, it was a little bit of the same thing, because if after he had given the deity of Joseph all this praise for allowing Joseph to understand and translate his dream into real life and reality and put a plan in place to do something about it, he never did come to that deity himself, because he would be giving up his own Egyptian deification.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. I'm done.
Hey, good points. No, good points. Yeah, clearly, and one of the things that your comments remind me of, and that others have pointed out, is that quite often, and there are biblical texts which support this, that basically what is going on behind the scenes on a big screen, we can almost imagine it. It's playing out before our eyes, is that the plagues are in fact a battle between the gods, if you will, between the God and between the false gods of the Egyptians, so that when these plagues strike, it's really striking at the heart of certain gods. Seth and I are working on our new series that's going to come out when we're ready on the northern prophets, and one of the things that I'm looking into now is, if you think, for instance, of the story of Elijah, we meet Elijah. He comes out of nowhere in Kings 17. He just shows up on the scene. We don't know anything about him, really. We get what we get when he shows up, but he is almost immediately at a confrontation with the god Baal. So we know a little bit about Baal from the biblical text. Baal is mentioned quite a bit, and we get little clues as to how people worshipped Baal and so forth. But one of the things that I wanted to do to understand that, the way this story unfolds, is I went through and I've been studying deeply, archaeologically, all the text from the people who worshipped Baal. This is, if you will, the Bible of Baal. What did they say about him and so forth. So whenever you see that there is a stopping of the rain, this is going to tie my point to what you just brought up, Nikita, in my mind anyway. It's that he says the rain will not start again until I say. This is Elijah. And the reason that's important is because Baal was seen by the worshipers of Baal as being in control of the storm clouds and so forth. So, in effect, the biblical writer wants us to see that the God who's really in control of the clouds, the storm, the rain, is not Baal, but it's Jehovah. So that's why we see that. Same thing in the Exodus narratives. We see, at least according to the ancient writers, that the as you called it, the gut punch, each and every blow, as the Hebrew Bible refers to it, is simply meant to show your gods are not in control, but the God of the Hebrew people is running the show. So good points, Nikita. Thanks for your comments as always. John,
one more. I wanted to one more.
Go ahead.
Before I left, the reason why it bothered me so much, I do know about each god for each plague being shut down by the Most High, as proof to the Egyptians, universal, that he is the one in control, particularly to the will of Pharaoh. The Most High will not leave us any recourse to think that whatever happens in our judgment, that we did not have a play in it, as far as being, we're left without excuse before him. So the Most High didn't have to harden Pharaoh's heart. Pharaoh showed up with that heart hardened based on how he was raised. Everything that Moses said to Pharaoh, the God of the Hebrews sent me to do this. Pharaoh's every response is basically, how dare you? How dare you affront who am here. I am seen as a God in flesh, so to speak. So the hardening of Pharaoh's heart is just a tradition in which he was raised in. He's like, your God can't even save you from me,
Yeah.
from my rule. And it's so illustrated well when he took the straw away. Let your God provide you with that. See if he can trump me in this issue.
Yeah.
So that it's all about free will. The Lord will not. That's why it's so important for us to obey him, because that's one thing that he gave us he will not take, and that is our free will. And that's the same thing with Pharaoh. If he manipulated Pharaoh in the situation, then Pharaoh can say, well, I would have done something differently had you not interfered with my will. And the
Yeah.
Lord will not give us that excuse.
Well, and to your point, I have in my notes, I remember in the class, I jotted this down again. There are 5 places in the Hebrew Bible where the Hebrew says, and I think if I recall, some of these are only, you can only see it in the Hebrew, but you could use a language tool if you don't know Hebrew. 5 times where it says that Pharaoh hardens his own heart. So that goes to your
Yes.
point. It's not like we look at it and you say, well, wait a minute. If God hardened his heart, what did he even have a say in it? Well, to your point, these 5 places, people can write these down. Exodus 7:14, Exodus 8:11, or verse 15 in the English, Exodus 8:28, or verse 32 in the English, Exodus 9:7, and 9:34. All 5 of those go along with your point that he hardened his own heart. And so what we have then is so God basically is saying, oh, you want to be hard-hearted to my people? You will not believe how hard I'm going to help your heart be. I'm going to strengthen your resolve. And see, that's why a lot of times the Hebrew says that God strengthens Pharaoh's heart. And people go, what does that mean? Well, he strengthened his resolve that was already predetermined. You want to be hard-hearted against my people? You are going to see what that really feels like. So, good points, Nikita. Thank you for your comments. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, John Baruch Perry. I see your hand was raised a few minutes ago. Are you there?
Good morning, Ross. You hear me?
I can hear you wonderfully. How are you?
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, Shabbat Shalom to you, and and to everybody else, of course. Thank you
Yep.
very much for the class today. That was very, very good. Um, as you're talking about the Israelites, being enslaved in Egypt, and they're working on various building projects and stuff for Pharaoh. Do you know offhand, or does anybody on here know whether or not today, if any of their building projects that they did do have survived through to today? And then, if so, where are they, or maybe what are they? Just curious.
Well, it's an excellent question, and it puts us deep seated into the debate. In other words, the discoveries that people are making today, people would say, well, is that from the Exodus? Well, it depends on when the Exodus was. So we don't get, what we do get is the passage in Exodus where it says that the Hebrews built the cities of Pitom and Ramesses. And what we know is that those names are from a later period than the Exodus, or it's, in other words, a later writer is anachronistically telling us that the children of Israel built those cities, those store cities. What people have gone there, there's some really good archaeological projects that are going on there. And I think that a lot of those get back to an earlier period, which more likely is the case, that the children of Israel, the Hebrews, when they were captive there, they would have built not Pitom and Ramesses, but the cities that are under those archaeologically earlier, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Certainly does with all we know about various tells and stuff. You bet it does. No, thank
Yeah,
you, Ross.
that's right. Hey, thank you. Good to hear from you. Tell Rhonda I said hello.
Good to be here. I will definitely. Thank you.
All right. Who else? We've got some good comments. Someone asked me, I think Julia said she wasn't ready. So I put those 5 references where it says that Pharaoh hardened his own heart. You can see those. Yeah, Exodus 7:14. When I say, this is the way I record, and so you learn this when I do my studies. If I say 8:11, that's chapter 8, verse 11, and then 15 in the English is what the E stands for. And that's because sometimes we see differences in Hebrew and English Bibles, so the verses don't always line up. Look, I wanted to say, while I have all of you here, we've been going for about an hour. I've got a few more minutes if you've got a few more minutes. But I did want to say, if you're not currently following what Jono Vandor and I are doing on Wednesday nights for the Yakad usually, Thursday it will be released for the public. But what we want you to do is, if you're interested in the Shapira saga, if you're interested in the discovery of what we call the Shapira manuscript fragments, please join us. Our last video that we did just this week is topping the charts, and we'd love for you to check those out. So let's see. Ross, I no longer have the raise hand icon and have a brief comment. Okay. Well, go ahead and unmute your mic. Seth has an alternative system here. You can click on the emoji sign and find you a raised hand and click that. But since I happen to be monitoring the chat, I'll go ahead and call your name. Elisheva, what kind of comments can you add to the class today?
Yes, thanks, Ross. I was just about to follow Seth's instructions, but I can do
I
that
got you.
next time, hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Shabbat Shalom. Just a couple of things. One is that I think we have all found in our studies that sometimes we begin with a certain. I remember John Carlson used to say, a stake in the sand or whatever. Okay, I believe this, and that's always going to be, and I'm not going to change it, and da 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 da. And as time goes on, we find that we do remove some of those stakes.
Yeah.
And I think one thing for me is I know that the stake I will never remove is that Yod He Vav He is my creator, and I just know that, and that stays. But there are other things, and what you mentioned about the different renditions of the plagues, the 10 plagues.
Yeah.
That shouldn't change our faith, or should the different renditions of the 10 words, because there are different renditions. Just like, I mean, you've heard the old adage, when someone is telling a story, say you see an accident of 3 or 4 people describing it, and each one of them brings his own whatever,
Yeah.
own personality into what they saw and heard. And that's their version. Now, does that mean the accident didn't happen? No. It's just a different perspective. And so I think in the beginning, I think we all felt that the New Testament was inerrant.
Yeah.
And then we transferred that to the Torah, the Tanakh. And now we're finding that most likely is not the case. But that doesn't change our faith, or it doesn't change the way I live from day to day, because I know who my creator is.
Yeah.
And I know that I just need to get up and live and share my light and keep studying and learning every day. And
Yeah.
as new things come, I weigh them and either accept them or say, no, I'm not ready for that yet. So I just think it makes sense. And what Julia's, not Julia, let me see, I just saw Julia on here. Nikita, about bringing our preconceived notions do our thoughts. Um, and that is so true. And I think we have to watch that and drop some of those preconceived notions, or we will be going backwards instead of forwards. And that's not the way that Hashem has for us to go.
I hear you. Look, I
We
was
can,
going to say
we can
one
look
other.
backwards.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that we can look backwards and see where we've been and use those lessons to look forward and not make the same mistakes.
Right.
That's really all.
Yeah, one thing that is coming out, many of you know that I'm working on a longer term project that I really don't want to give a date for because I just don't know. It might be 30 years from now. Let me go ahead and give you that scary date. But I am always working on a commentary, if you will, on the Pentateuch. And one of the things that I spent a lot of time developing so far, and I continue to work on it, is when I deal with the Exodus, when I'm talking about the Exodus as we see it laid out in the biblical text in the Pentateuch, we're dealing with an event that is described variously throughout the biblical text as this. It's the one thing wherein God made a name for himself. I want you to think about that phrase. And so, like Betty, you say what a lot of us would say. One of our anchor points is, look, we believe in the God Yod He Vav He, and I would say that same thing. That's an anchor point for me. What is curious to me, and what I really have found myself digging deeply into, primarily because of the work of scholars today in the field of studies in the Pentateuch, is when did that name come in? And look, I know the apologetic view that it's been here forever, but in today's class, let me just bring up, because this is from Torah portion Vaera. Vaera is, and I appeared. Well, that's interesting because in that passage, God says, and look, believe me, there are people who do not like it when I say this. I get some mail you wouldn't believe. And a lot of people who are fundamentalist in their approach really don't like this part. But here's what the Hebrew, look it up, Exodus chapter 6:2. And what happens is God tells Moses, by my name, Yod He Vav He, I was not known to the fathers. I was known as El Shaddai, and you know the passage. So what that does is it creates a problem for people because they immediately go back to Genesis and they say, oh, look, here's the name, Genesis chapter 4. Then men began to call upon the name Yod He Vav He. So what they say is they say, well, it clearly can't mean that the name was not known. I've heard other biblical scholars who are fundamentalists say he's asking, this is their view. It's like, surely they knew me by my name, Yod He Vav He, but that's not what it says. What it says is he was not known by that name. And so what happens is with the Exodus chapter 3 and Exodus 6, which are from different sources, show that God told Moses this name. Moses hears about it, and he has to go back and tell the children of Israel. Well, you notice something else in the story. Pharaoh says, I don't know that name. Now, do you think that the Pharaoh, who all of the people of Israel are there, he's never heard this name before? No one knows this name. And it's interesting that the Exodus is tied to the idea that I will make a name for myself, or the God who made a name for himself with the Exodus. So I throw that out there just to let people consider, what was God known as anciently, and could this be the reason that we have different versions of stories with different versions of the name? And see, Eric, I see your comment. What's the definition of known? Clearly, the idea is that they did not know that name, just like we mean in our language. But people can look at that and they can say, well, I'm going to take something and dig into the semantics of it. But what he's saying is that he makes himself known by this name. He says, by this name, the fathers didn't know me. So what it's saying is that they would not have referred to him as Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. But one more point to tie back to Betty's point is this. The way that it's worded in both Exodus 3 and Exodus chapter 6 is that he is revealing this covenant name, and he's saying, I am the God formerly known as El Shaddai, Elohim, etc. And so that's what becomes the name whereby he's known throughout all generations. I'll give you one more point on the name. There is no name in the Hebrew Bible prior to this event that includes a form of the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Later, we see it all over the place. Yeshayahu, Eliyahu, all of the names which have a form of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. We see that later. But in the biblical period, we see names like El. We see names like, Eloah. We see that form of the name. Israel is a divine name attached to a person, but notice it's what we would call El. Anyway, just an interesting point. I didn't want to leave that out, and it doesn't necessarily tie to Betty's point, but it allowed me to jump in with that and make sure that I said it while we were on the topic. Betty,
Well,
did you have
thanks, Ross.
something
I'm
else?
glad.
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to say thank you, and I'm glad you did bring that up because that is a source of contention with a lot of people,
Yeah.
and it doesn't need to be,
That's right.
in my opinion, my humble opinion. There are so many things that divide us, and surely we can come together with the attributes of who our Creator is. And if he says that he wasn't known by that name, then he was not known by that name. And so
Right.
we just need to accept it and not get so stiff-necked.
Right.
Anyway,
Good points.
Roger and I used to have a discussion about who was the most stubborn.
Yeah.
And I still think he was, but he, I'm sure, would say, if he could say today, that I was.
There you
So
go.
I know I'm stubborn, but the things about Hashem, and I'll say Hashem, I could say Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh,
Oh,
but
sure.
anyway,
Good points.
that's it. That's all. But thank you so much.
Hey, thank you, Betty. I see Clody's comment. She says, I can't speak, but I'm going to write something in. I'm going to write something. In my beginnings in UIW, I ran on a Saturday class by Dr. James Tabor, and that class was about the name. And I remember myself being flared up about how he was saying that I will be what I will be might not be a name. Me, coming from Jehovah's Witnesses, I was very confused about that class, but now I can see Dr. Tabor's points. And so the idea, I think I remember that. In fact, I've talked to James recently. He stays pretty busy, as you all know. Some of you try to follow his work as well. But he is in the process, and I don't think he's with us online right now. And so he's announced again a new date. I say again sort of jokingly because I know what it's like. You want to write a book and you've got 10,000 things going on, and so he keeps saying that he's going to re-release his Restoring Abrahamic Faith, which contains a portion on the name. He's going to actually have that, he says, in February, I think, if I recall. So it's on Genesis
Actually,
2000.
Ross, he said in an email to me that he was planning by his birthday, which is in March.
Well, but let me see. Hold on,
So
because
we'll
he
see.
Well, he just had me post the date change, and I don't remember when it was. Let's
Oh,
see.
okay. Well,
Yeah.
good. Maybe he's
Mm-hmm.
gotten a wind behind his
I
back.
don't know. I don't know, but I will definitely find that because he just told me the date. So here's the main point. If he doesn't, whatever that date is, don't write me. People write me and ask me when James's book is coming out. I don't know when my book is coming out. So don't ask me, ask him. Send him an email. Let me look at this. I'm going to pull this up since the point just came out. So John Perry just posted, Baruch just posted a link probably to the class. Yep, and Clody says, you are Baruch. You are a Baruch. You are right. Let's leave it to Baruch. He can nail that down. What are some other comments while we still have a few minutes? I'm interested to know if there are others who want to add a few things to our comments at the time. Let me see. Okay, here it is. I'm sorry, I found the date. A new revised edition will be released on February 3rd, 2024, is what he told me, and made me update it. So there you go. But either way, if he doesn't, hit him up on social media. Who else do we have?
Can I get in one?
Yeah, sure, Charles.
Could you look at Hosea 2:16 and give us that Ross K. Nichols English Hebrew pronunciation thing?
Let's see. I'm pulling it up now. Charles, tell me while I'm looking it up. Tell me what your thoughts are, and we'll go with.
I'll read it out of the ISR 2009. And it shall be in that day, declares Yah, that you call me my husband and no longer call me my Baal.
Yeah. Okay, and
So
it shall
I
be.
agree with. I'm gonna
Go
shut
ahead.
up.
No, go ahead.
I so agree with Betty about not getting too wrapped up. I mean, it's easy. We've divided ourselves before on this, but and I'm not trying to throw another name in there, to pronounce, but we speak to our Elohim and privately, and so I would like to know how to privately. I would like to know how to say my husband in Hebrew. And boy, that sounds funny coming from an Alabama redneck, but let me have it, please.
Yeah, you got to be careful. You have to be careful, Charles. Down here in the South where we live, somebody's going to say, I don't know, I heard Charles online talking about his husband. But no, to your point, this passage, it's a good translation that you just read. It basically says, and in that day it will be, declares Yod-Heh Vav-Heh. And then, so the next part of it, you shall call me my ish. You shall call me my ish, my man, basically, and shall no more call me my Baal. Now, let me give you a little background here, and for those of you who patiently await us to begin a series on the Northern Prophets, you understand that at the time, Baal they had, bear with my modern day analogy, they had churches on every corner in Israel for Baal. They had good children's programs. They had nice choirs. They had potluck dinners on Sunday. These people were worshiping Baal just like you can imagine. I mean, it was big business. They had the slick-haired, handsome preachers drawing in crowds of worshipers for Baal. And so people would sing probably in the choir in the loft at the church of Baal in the land of Israel now. They would sing songs to my Baal. Baali, they would sing. And so what God says is there's coming a time when you will no longer refer to me as Baal. Because the people were really confused. And so that's why we get this confrontation that's really in the north. Now, think about it. when we deal with people like Jezebel, Itzavel in Hebrew, what the reason that this is so wicked in the north is because Itzavel is the daughter of a Tyrian, basically from Tyre, and she's a princess, and she really brings in the worship of Baal. But think about it. If you read from First Kings 11, where Solomon has all these women, and he's married a Moabite princess and all these different women. He builds a temple to Baal. This is big time stuff going on. So I know I'm going on a little bit about this, but let me just tell you, Charles, what you've noticed there is very big. They've taken Baal and they've incorporated it into the worship in the north. Now, it happens to take place in the south too. Don't think Judah's clear of this. They get in trouble for it later. But in the north, they've really embraced the love of the god Baal. And so Hosea, again, is a prophet to the north. And so he's trying to shut this down and let them know there's coming a time when you'll no longer say this. And the problem is that we have two things that we have to understand: transliteration and translation. What if I translate Baal, it's generally translated as husband or Lord. And the two are synonymous at the time because, as we say, back in the day, in that culture, the husband was the lord of the house, if you will. And so I know some women on here are probably saying, well, that don't work like that at my house. But back in the biblical times, this is what we're talking about. So the idea is that some people will transliterate it and some people translate it. So now, whether you're a Jew or a Christian, people often refer, and our translations do this too, they refer to God as Lord. So then some people who are big about restoring the divine name would say, don't refer to the deity as Lord, because Hosea 2:16 says, you'll no longer call me my Lord, because some translations of 2:16 say that. But I think the main point in all of this is a very specific deity, and it's written at a specific time, and the point is to suggest that Baal will be defeated, and that's one of the main points of our series on the Northern Prophets, is the battle between Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh and Baal through the prophets and so forth. So, all right, what else? Yes, Bob, I thought it said, you shall no longer call me Baali. Yeah, I don't know what I said that might have been different than that. But because Baali is my Baal. So he's saying Baal, it's almost, it's the ancient writer is telling us the translation and the transliteration. So at church, bear with me as I use this illustration. At the first Baal church of Samaria, that's not really a place, I don't think, but you get the point. They would have in their hymnals songs to Baal, and part of the lyrics would be Baali, which means my Baal, my man, my husband, my lover, my Lord. And Jehovah is battling that through the prophet by saying, y'all aren't going to say that anymore. You're going to say to me, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, you're going to call me my ish, my man. So it's really a battle of love. In fact, if you look at chapter 2 of Hosea, it is sort of a lovey-dovey kind of text, because in chapter 2, he says God says, I'm going to woo, you know this word woo you into the wilderness where I will fall in love with you again. And it's sort of a, how do we say, nostalgia. Okay, guys, let's say you wanted to woo your woman say you've been married like I have for almost 40 years, and you're going to make your woman fall in love with you again, and you can still remember the first restaurant you took her out to eat. You bring her back to that place and spark that romance again. That's what's happening in chapter 2 of Hosea. And God is speaking through Hosea saying, you won't be confused anymore by calling me the name of another lover. Hopefully that long answer makes that point pretty clear. All right. Anything else? Yeah, so Clody, bringing it into clear language like this, it's like Jesus is God in our modern, in our days, Christianity. So it would be like someone today saying, you shall not call me my Jesus. At least that's how I can parallel it. And that's actually a very good parallel. It's the God of the Hebrew Bible is saying, you need to get this straight and don't be confused, right? And then Arta says, maybe this is saying that everyone in the end will understand that Jehovah is the creator, and that's exactly right. You're dead on, Arta. It's this idea. Isaiah puts it out in second Isaiah over and over, where it says, ultimately, from the rising of the sun to its setting, they'll know me as God, right? And in Micah chapter 4, it says that in that day, everyone walks in the name of his God. We will walk in the name of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, our God, forever and ever. And then by the time you get to Zechariah 14, in Zechariah 14:9, it says, and in that day, Jehovah will be one and his name one. So right now you could go out and you go, what is God's name? And people would give you, whatever God that they believe in. But ultimately, Zechariah 14:9 paints the picture of a universal Shema. And so that's the idea, is that ultimately that's where the world is going. To one God, and everyone is straight on it, and it sort of seems to come around like Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 9 says that there will be, the whole world will be converted to a pure lip, it says, and they will all be able to call upon the name. So to the question of Charles in Hosea chapter 2, verse 16, and Zechariah 14:9, and Hosea chapter 4, Micah chapter 4, there is this idea that the name of God, as he chooses to be referred to, will ultimately be from sea to shining sea. All the world will know whose God that is. Okay. And I see Miriam's point. She's throwing out that good Hebrew that she knows. Ein od. That's excellent, Miriam. If you look that phrase up in Hebrew, you'll see it over and over. Ein od. In Hebrew, in English, it means and no more or no other. Ani Yehovah, ein od. I am Jehovah and there is no other. Ein od. Look that up. Good phrase. Okay. Wonderful chat. Look, thanks everyone. Do we have someone else wanted to jump in? I think I hear a voice.
Yeah,
Or
I
am
just want a more clarification. I think the reason I'm a little confused with this, if they're in a church worshiping Baal, they're not worshiping God. But he says, "You shall no longer call me Baali." That's where I'm getting the disconnect in my head.
I'm sorry. I don't quite follow. I don't want to just answer it again and miss your question. What specifically are you asking, Bob? Go ahead.
So you're saying that the people are in their churches worshiping Baal, saying my Baal. But what it says in Hosea is, "You shall no longer call me, Baali."
Yeah.
So if they're not worshiping him, then they're not calling him that in the first place. That's where I'm getting the disconnect in my head.
It could be that I'm not explaining it well. That's probably the case. But the way I understand this is they have mixed the worship of the real God with a false God. So
Oh, okay.
So, for instance, like in the Exodus, no, this is great clarification, Bob, because I didn't make it very clear. So, let's say in the Exodus, when Aaron heads up the making of a golden calf, and you know what he tells the people? Later, he says he didn't do it. And rabbinic literature supports him on this to that day, or that to this day, is he says, this is the God that brought you out of the land of Egypt. Well, they know that the God, Moses has already told them, Yod He Vav He is the one who's bringing us out. But see, they associate that golden calf with the real God, as the story would present it. So what happens in the north is that they have begun to associate, and have been for quite some time by this point, as the story unfolds. We learn that remember, there are 450 prophets of Baal. And so, but they've literally, it's become so mixed. Remember, Hosea also talks about the northern kingdom has become a cake half mixed. So it's got elements of the true and elements of the false all mixed into this nasty cake. And all the people are eating it. So what I think Hosea 2:16 is say that you're going to break apart the true from the false. Is that any better, Bob? Have I clarified it or muddied the water more? Because I think go ahead.
No, that makes much more sense.
Yeah, I
We
think,
talked about this in the chat last week a bit.
yeah. Yeah, I just see it as when I say they're in their churches, that might not be fair. Maybe that's a little mean or whatever. But my point being is that they have developed a place, and I think a lot of people are innocent in that they're doing what they know, what they've been told, maybe even in the ancient world. But what's happened is that there is a time when God steps on the scene through his spokesman or spokeswomen, if you will, and says, let's clean this up. Let's take the mud out. Let's make it clear. You're no longer going to call me my Baal, because I'm not Baal. In fact, he even says that he's going to take the name of the Baalim, the Baals, out of their mouth. So that's the reason I say, I see them walking around and they're singing hymns to Baal. Look, I love the Beatles, but there's some songs that have catchy tunes that I try not to listen to, because it's my sweet Lord, and you can start singing and you're saying, well, should I be listening to this song? No, at least in my view. Okay, hopefully that cleared it up a little bit. Any final comments before we go? Mother Mary, that's there you go. Clody brings up another Beatles song. The Beatles, man, they have some good music. But like so many things we have in secular music, we have some really, really good stuff. And then we have other things that are not so much. But like Clody says, that's not idol worship, that's safe. So according to Clody, and that way I can still like that song, right? Hey, have a beautiful day. Look, bring the discussion into, if you follow along on Discord, bring the discussion into the dialogue there. Post some of these things. Jodell brought up some excellent points. We've got David Tyler has brought in some excellent points. Let's pull that in there. And listen, if you don't do Discord and you do Twitter, I'm trying to work with you here. Seth's trying to work with it so that everybody can be part of this discussion. We're going to bring part of the discussion to our Twitter, so you can follow me on Twitter if you do Twitter. And under Twitter, you'll see that I have a Horeb community there as well. So please join us there. I don't do Facebook. Some of you heard that we were hacked or whatever you call it, and so I'm done with Facebook now. So you can't find me there, but you can find me on Twitter or here in the Discord in Horeb. Look, I know that others have reminded you. If you have not yet signed up for the United Israel Conference, please do so. We would love to see you in person if that's possible. If it's not possible and you won't be here or you live overseas, we're going to do everything we can to post the videos of the sessions, maybe not live streamed, but we will post those later. That's the goal. But if you can show up, please do show up. And I look forward to that. If you have not yet watched the latest with Jono and me, please check that out on the YouTube channel. It's under the series we're doing on Shapira. And join us this week if you haven't yet. Thank you to all of our supporters. We appreciate members of the Yakad. You give us the possibility of doing this without charge to the entire world, and we truly, truly appreciate it. God bless you. Have a beautiful week, and I look forward to seeing you midweek. Talk to you then. Thank you. Appreciate you.